How do you feel about religion now that you are not going to go through any conflict or like this?
No crises or
Crisis.
whatever.
So,
Well, I guess I just think of it as something which is a part of me. In a sense, I have assimilated it, and I don't give it too much thought. I don't reflect on it. I don't agonize over it any longer. I'm comfortable with it. I'm easy with it. I resist it at times. Occasionally when I'm faced with questions, for example, as a woman, one often is faced with situations where religion seems to be a hindrance to what you want to achieve. At that moment, I resist it, I fight with it, but I'm easy with it. I'm comfortable with it. It is a part of my heritage, and like everything else, I do not expect it to be without contradictions and ambiguities. I accept the ambiguities, and as I say, in a sense, I've assimilated it. Also, I think I've personally tested it because there were moments of crisis, and I would mention the death of my parents as being particularly critical in the past 5 years of my life. And I found that, it was very different. I didn't need to say an extra prayer. I didn't need to do anything very extraordinary with my religion. It comforted me, it provided me with an understanding of what was happening to me. And I found, in a sense, that there was an acceptance in the more positive sense of the term, not in the sense of throwing up one's hands in despair and being overwhelmed by something. But it helped me to understand situations and know myself, and to know that I didn't have to go through any particular ritual to establish my relationship with God. There was less of a tension, less of a sense of insecurity. So I can just say that I guess whatever my belief is, since I do not reflect on it a great deal, it has been assimilated into who I am as a person and my attitudes towards life and people and relationships.
you say that you've accepted contradictions. I just want to ask you about how you deal with the parts of the Quran which upset most women, and how you personally sort them out.
Well, I guess I take a fairly historical view of religion. It is a matter of faith for me, but I'm not, I'm not an Orthodox Muslim, and I'm comfortable because most times I'm able to give it the perspective that I need, that I seek, that I require. And therefore, I think that when I talked about a resistance earlier to ambiguities, I think that resistance in me will always be there. I will never accept something just because it is written there. But I am prepared to look at things in a historical context. And I am prepared to look at certain sections of the Quran as being for a time and a place. For me, this is not an eternal truth. It is not an eternal verity. For me, this is a particular position taken at a particular moment in time, however unpalatable it may have been. But it was a step forward in some ways. But given the patriarchal nature of all religions, there is bound to be that in it, which we reject and which we will resist and which we will fight. But it does not mean that because there are certain portions of the Quran that I find unpalatable, especially with regard to women, that I will reject the entire spiritual heritage and the cultural heritage of myself as a Muslim. I cannot do it because for me it would mean becoming something I am not. So parts of it that comfort me I will use, and of course it is very convenient in some ways. But I think everybody makes selective use of religion, and not religion alone, of all history. Whenever we read something, whenever we pick up a book or we pick up a document, there is a bias and a perspective with which we approach it. And we tend to look at it in a way that suits us. And similarly, I think that, when I say I'm easy with religion, I use it the same way. I pick up what gives me comfort and solace. I resist what I find unpalatable, and I see no problem with it.
You don't expect any sort of absolute truth from what, maybe I should ask you first, you think the Quran is the word of God?
Well, I guess as a Muslim, I accept that it is the word of God through a messenger who was a mortal. And therefore, it is the word of God mediated through a mortal. Now, I am not enough of a religious scholar to, because when the Quran was finally put together was a long time after the Prophet's death. And there may be things in it which, if they're not entirely, if we don't disbelieve in them, we may say that they have been placed out of context. I am not really ready to answer that question because I don't know enough. But I guess I do believe it is the word of God, but mediated through a prophet.
And so
But I do not. Yes, I think it is definitely liable to historical interpretations. I think that it cannot be an ahistorical document for me. It has to be rooted in time and place and be specific, and therefore open to change. And it has been open to change historically. Whether the Orthodox resist this or not, it has historically been open to change. And therefore, there it is.
Okay. Do you perform any of the rituals of Islam?
No, not really. Not very much. But I will occasionally fast in Ramzan. And I do say my prayers from time to time. Whenever I feel I need to be a little more in touch, I may do it. But no, I'm not a ritualistic person at all.
You feel Islam is more a cultural thing rather than
Well, it is definitely a cultural thing for me. There are no two ways about that. It is definitely that. It's my heritage, it's my culture, it's my upbringing. It is everything around me. But how much of it is faith in Islam as divorced from culture, I really cannot say. I think if it was not part of my cultural heritage, possibly I could be more logical about it. But I have to, like most human beings, we have to root ourselves somewhere. And I root myself within the Muslim tradition.
But do you think that you can root yourself in the Muslim tradition without believing in what are called the tenets of Islam?
Possibly, it may be so. But as I say, that I guess I do get my spiritual sustenance from it to a degree. I do get it from it, and in a sense, all religions are universal, and the truths are universal, and their prescriptions are universal. And therefore, I don't find that if I were a Buddhist or if I were a Christian or if I were any other religion, if I were born into any other religion, I would gain more. I find this is the tradition. This is the tradition. I'm culturally at home in this tradition. And as far as universality of religious prescription goes, I guess that is universal. That is there.
So you're saying if you were born into another religion, that would have done just as well.
That's right. I happen to be located here. It is not a conscious choice. I don't know what.
Think that Islam is superior to the other.
No. I have never felt that, and I don't believe that.
Do you believe in God as being the force of good and Satan as being the force of evil and that traditional thing?
I do believe in a struggle between good and evil.
And God is the good.
And
pure good.
whatever we call God does represent the good, and what we call Satan in a very simplistic sense. But of course, I don't look at it that simply. I don't think necessarily that God is all good the way that I define good. It depends on how you define good. Nor do I think it's much more complex. I think that God and Satan are both obviously standing for something. They're not actual entities, there's nobody with a long beard or two horns, with a forked tail or anything. So if they're not anthropomorphic figures, and if they are symbols of something, then within good and within evil there is a whole range of complexity which I don't deny. I think that is part of the challenge of trying to understand what religion is. If you reduce it to absurd black and white situations, then there's nothing to believe, there's nothing to struggle with. I think that one is seeking something else in there which is more complex and which cannot be reduced to black and white, God white, devil black, or Satan black.
But don't all the religions tend to reduce life to black and white in that sense, that sin and doing good?
I don't think so. I think that these are very complex concepts, and of course some people, perhaps the ordinary believer, may in some instances, or those whose business it is to use religion for, or use divine sanction to reach their own particular end, they possibly do. But anybody who reflects a little, or who wants to understand what religions are about, or the nature of good and evil, or what motivates human actions, I don't think that they would reduce it to black and white.
Okay, as you know, of course, during Zaz's time, when WAF and other organizations were trying to fight the Islamization policy in Israel, the debate about whether to fall into the thing of using Islam against Islam, or whether to leave it out without that whole thing came up. So, what did you think then was the correct thing to do, and why?
I did think that we should get into the whole religious question. I was one of those who did think that we needed to, because as a purist, one may take a different position. As a theoretician, one may. If one was locked up in an ivory tower and one was not an activist, one may be in a more comfortable position of having no contradictions and no ambiguities and no struggles. You adopt a position which is absolutely pure, and you stay with it. But if you are an activist, as we were, those of us who were resisting what Zia was doing, then I think you need to acquaint yourself with what is concerning people, or what is being debated, or what is being used, or what is being manipulated at that point in time, and that was religion. The majority, we had a problem in the sense that we were isolated. We were dubbed westernized, we were dubbed anti-religious, and therefore marginalized in a sense. We were the people who did not represent anything, because we were told we had no roots in our own culture, our tradition, our system, that we were cut off from the majority of women in Pakistan who were Muslims and who believed, and who, as we know, they are not even literate. So there was a whole, the whole business of superstition one had to resist. And one also had to offer the comfort that religion could offer, or at least talk of the rights that were there within religion. Now this is a separate matter on how far we can go with it. But at that point it was a question of survival. And I do not regret the fact that we went into the religious question. I would not like to use the word used religion, because I don't think we did. I think it was an eye-opener for us. I think we were hopelessly, terribly, unforgivably ignorant. And that was a period of time in which we learned a little more about our religion and how it operates in society and what the effect of it is. And I think we learned to respect a lot of people whom we had been dismissive of earlier. A lot of women, very religious women, who came out and stood with us and who genuinely were opposed to the use that religion was being made of. I mean, their religious sensibilities were outraged at the way religion was being abused. And they came and stood with us, and they took a progressive position. I think we would have ended up by alienating everyone if we had taken a position that religion is irrelevant. Because it is not irrelevant to the needs of people. It's intertwined with your daily lives, your customs, your beliefs. You don't even know the areas of your life and psyche that religion enters.
To say, the Lahore I was taking was perhaps a middle class and not a working class position. So, how do you feel about that?
Well, I don't believe it for a minute. Certainly, religion plays different roles in different classes of society, be it men, women, anybody. But to say that religion is not the concern or the rural poor are not affected by religion is really, to my way of thinking, absolutely incorrect. Because whether the rural poor are religious or not, whether they follow the prescriptions of Islam is another question. But the fact is that Islam or religion, through custom, through tradition, through superstition, affects their lives daily. And it is the stick that they are used to be beaten with. It is not how religious they are. It is what is the role of religion in their lives. How is religion used to oppress them? And how, when questions are asked, is this religious, is this not religious? Do you need a woman's consent for a nikah or not? Yes, of course you need a woman's consent, but you have to tell that woman, look, in your religion, the Maulvi is all wrong. In your religion, your consent is necessary. There cannot be a nikah. Your husband, your uncle, your mamu, they cannot marry you off. It is eventually you who has to acquiesce. So religion affects the lives of women, and that has nothing to do with personal faith or understanding or belief, which may be a middle class. I mean, it's debatable. But even if we let that go for the time being, that may be a middle class phenomena or a lower middle class or a petty bourgeois phenomena. But the effect of religion is another thing altogether. And you cannot expect those women to pick up cudgels and say, well, I don't give a damn about my religion, I want my freedom. Now that's a very middle class way of thinking, or an upper middle class way of thinking, to think that women can take such total stands. But they should be empowered to deal with it at the level at which it affects them. They should be able to point to the rights that are given to them within their religion and say, I'm sorry, this is out. This is something that my religion has given you no sanction to oppress me this way.
But what I was trying to get at is another point, like say to take Bhutto, and even if he hadn't said Islamic socialism, he could probably have, and he did get a lot of support from women just by talking about socialism or talking about women's rights, not saying anything about Islam at all. So you can, to a certain extent, you can operate without raising it yourself.
Yes, you don't need to raise it, but when it is raised. And that was the problem that we had during the Zia years. We were not the ones to raise it. And believe me, I don't think religion ought to be raised at all. I would not actively go out and raise it, but I would certainly be prepared to pick up cudgels and to be able to combat, using my religion, the rights that are given to women under Islam, using that when it is necessary. I have no qualms about it, in a sense. Because I really think of it when you talk of truth. Whose truth are you talking about anyway? And why are you there in the arena? If you are an activist, then you are there to empower, then you are there to struggle. You are not there to take, obscure theoretical positions. on religion. I mean, I do feel strongly about that, which does not mean that I'm suggesting that you turn your back on the truth and you sort of behave like the Jamaat-e-Islami women, that you use religion when, or not even the Jamaat-e-Islami women. The last 11 years was a wonderful illustration of how religion is used. I'm not talking of that kind of use. I am talking of at least moving one step ahead and gaining the rights that are there, that are not implemented, that are even legally yours. Legally, the position of women in Pakistan is not as bad as some other countries in the world. But socially, the position of women and the status of women is appalling. So you move along as far as you can go with the protection that is there instead of challenging it. And eventually, I don't know. I think that this is a crucial question. It's a crucial issue, and I am perhaps even being the devil's advocate slightly. But I think that when you look at historical development of societies in the West, if you look at Christianity or you look at civilization and the secularization of society which comes about, that is something that is a historical process. Now, I am all for the secularization of our society. But in a secular society, religion does not disappear. It retreats into the personal arena. And that is what ideally should be happening in our society. That it retreats into the private arena. But right now, I don't think we are at a point where I think it is something that will happen. That is a historical process of evolution that will happen. But religion will still play a role in human lives. But until that time, if challenged, I think we ought to be prepared to point to religion and to use religion as a liberator insofar as you can use it.
You just said right now that we should at least first try and get as many rights as we do have in Islam. But if you think that if we started doing that, it would also reinforce in the whole society's mind that all we are entitled to is what religion gives us and no more, because that is what we are demanding, only what religion is, and there is a limit.
Well, of course, there are interpretations of religion. You can always challenge things. You can always challenge up to a great extent. You can challenge, and I think that, as I say, that I wish that it was possible for us, and possibly with democratization of society, what will happen is that a secularization will take place. We will not always have to revert to religion to seek a sanction. But in those moments, I'm talking of the moments of crisis, when religion becomes an issue. But I'm not talking of those moments when there is some sanity in society and when universal human values are what we are all talking about and when justice is what we're talking about, and we're not necessarily seeking a sanction in religion. Although in Pakistan, there will always be that resistance to any legislation, because first we have to clear it कि जी ये Islamic है या नहीं Islamic है. I'm prepared to say that anything that is just as far as I'm concerned is Islamic. I'm just prepared to take that situation. You want to call it Islamic, call it Islamic. You want to call it Buddhist, call it Buddhist, call it what you like. The question is that if there is in your religion a movement towards equality, if there is a movement in your religion, a movement in religion towards emancipation, then I certainly don't think that we should be looking at the letter of the law. We ought to be consulting the spirit of the law. And that, of course, is, for any one of us to interpret. I mean, if there is ijtihad, then ijtihad is possible for anyone in our society, because we are not a theocratic society. We do not have an established priesthood who interprets things. So then who's to say that why should my interpretation be challenged? It is a question of political power eventually. If you can bring enough power to sustain this debate, then this whole business of Islam, I hope at some point there'll just be a falling off. It will just, we will not need that kind of a sanction that everything has to be sanctioned by Islam. Then we will take it for granted that everything that is progressive and fair and just is Islamic. And that is the position that we should be working from. Instead of trying to eliminate the roots of religion in society, that I think is going to be a very difficult task.
And probably counterproductive.
And possibly, yes, probably counterproductive in the end. But if you really go on the offensive with it, like scholars have, why have women like Fatma Mernissi, sociologists and political scientists, total secularists, possibly not certain whether what their belief is, why have they spent the last 10 years going into ahadith, into who transmitted what are the authentic ahadiths, which ones are the non-authentic ahadiths, what are the chapters in the Quran, what are the injunctions? Why would you say that the last 10 years have been spent in this kind of scholarship? There are feminist theologians in the world, and they are people who believe. You cannot say that they are making a strategic use of religion. But they are equally strong feminists. The question is that this tension and ambiguity and contradiction in society is bound to exist. There's no historical truth that cannot be challenged. We don't even know the roots of patriarchy yet. We are looking, we are exploring, we are discovering. In a sense, we are replacing things that we thought we knew yesterday with things that we've discovered today. We are rejecting certain things as myths. We are coming up with truths. We are using part of myths to buttress our position. Similarly, the debate and the tension between feminism and religion will continue. And eventually, it might be fruitful. Because if religion is tapping a source, a spiritual source within human beings and a psychological need within human beings, I believe in challenging religion. I think that the only time when the only way that you can look at it is when you're totally comfortable with challenging it and totally comfortable with accepting certain things about it as well. So if it has to be, and this is not part of our religion is challenged by believers everywhere in the world. In the entire Christian world, religion is challenged by people who are believers. But in Muslim tradition, we are afraid to challenge because we are afraid of being labeled a kafir. But I don't mind. We have a long history. We have a long philosophical history of people like the Mutazilites who challenged religion, who challenged the Quran, and who called themselves believers. Now, if we can place ourselves, if we can recover some of our own tradition and place ourselves within a tradition which is not afraid, which has a productive and a productive relationship with religion in the sense that it feels free to challenge. It is not based on fear. It is not based on fear of being called a kafir or a fatwa from here or there or the other. Then maybe something will happen which will energize the relationship between feminism and religion. Right now, I think that it's a dreadful situation. Really, there is.
I think Ms. Huda would react by saying, well, if you do to Islam what the Christians have done to Christianity, which is like, they now, homosexuality is okay, women priests are okay, everything, all the strict rules are going. As they see it, then it's sort of the death of the religion as well, because, how many people, it has coincided with sort of the death of the religion in Western society.
It's either coincided with the death or it is the last rescue operation. That you make religion relevant to the lives and questions and issues that people are facing. What is liberation theology all about? It is dealing with, and if you look at the business of turning the other cheek, and you look into militant Christianity supporting liberation movements, even to some degree supporting use of violence, then they have been able to stand their religion on their head and yet take something out of it, which gives people comfort. Similarly, if we could do something like that with our religion, what is stopping us from doing it if we want to do it? I'm not necessarily advocating it. I'm simply saying that there are a whole host of possibilities. The only thing is not to just throw out religion and say, phew, now I've got rid of this, now finally I can be liberated. Because I don't think you ever threw out anything. The struggle with Marxism and feminism is still going on. And that was one ideology that at least some of us believed very strongly would be the ultimate liberation of women. But within it, it carried strands which conflicted with feminism and with the eventual freedom and liberation of women. And so that struggle goes on. There are radical feminists, there are radical Marxists, there is something. They are being able to change. They are being able to bring about some kind of a change, whereas Marxism begins to look at itself and its own position on women. Similarly, in religion, there is a possibility for a fruitful interaction. You asked me earlier this business of the word of God which can't be changed. But if we accept ijtihad as a practice, then without saying that we are changing the word of God, we are changing social reality, which is what it's all about anyway. The change of social reality.
But so far ijtihad has been defined by Maulvis, and ijtihad is very strict as well.
The terms of ijtihad are very strict. It can only be an Islamic scholar. But if you look at it,
I mean, even when you're doing ijtihad, the Quran can't be.
The Quran cannot be, but the Quran can be interpreted. After all, every day in courts of law, is the law not interpreted? Is the constitution not interpreted? Does the Shariat bench not give interpretations and conflicting interpretations of the same thing? On the one hand, the government says that a woman cannot be a judge. On the other hand, the Shariat bench gives you a ruling saying a woman can be a judge. And of course, the wrangling is still going on. Can a woman be a head of a state? Can a woman do this? Can a woman do that? And from within your learned scholars of Islam, you are getting 72 different positions. So if there is a perspective, everybody is bringing a perspective to religion. So why should women not be bringing their own perspective?